I'd like to give you some tips here about using masking fluid. With watercolour, we don't use white paint very much. Some purists never use any white paint. The white of the paper is the white of your subject. So for example, in this painting of snowdrops, there's no paint that is white on here. So what do? How do we keep the paper white? So we either paint around the shape or we cover the shape with a product called masking fluid, which is a form of liquid latex. You get different brands. Some of them are blue, some of them are colourless, some of them are white. There is a permanent one which I would urge you to avoid. This is a classic Winsor & Newton. You can see it's got a bit of a tint. Now the tint tends to settle at the bottom of the bottle. So the temptation would be to shake it. Don't do that, because what it does is it affects the composition of the material and it starts to go lumpy and claggy. Also, if you shake it, you get bubbles, and if you're applying masking fluid with bubbles in to your paper, they're going to pop at some point and it's not going to cover the paper. So let's just say we're going to draw a snowdrop here. So for example, there's its little cap, and if I draw the petals coming out like that, 1, 2, the little skirt inside, and the third petal visible around the back, and there's its stem coming there, and we may well have the spathe visible over there, for example. Now, masking fluid is, as I said, liquid latex, and it dries rubbery and solid, and you don't want that in a nice brush. So if you're going to use a brush, use an old brush. You can protect your brush by coating it and rinsing it every now and then in a dishwashing liquid solution. So let's get going. Something I sometimes do is I take a little bottle like this, a glass bottle with a square base, because it's not going to tip over very easily, whereas this taller bottle, and the fact that it's plastic, means it can tip over quite easily and you get masking fluid all over the place. Now if it lands on a hard surface like that, there's no problem. However, if it lands on your clothing or on your carpet, it is not easy to remove. So here I go, applying it with a brush. And I need a fairly thick coverage. Another thing is, try to use pure cotton paper. If you're using one of the cellulose-based papers, the surface is rather soft, and there is the risk that when you remove the masking fluid, it will tear. Now I'm seeing a couple of bubbles there, so what I do is I just pop them while they're wet and then give the brush a rinse. If I want to continue, just to dry off the brush, and it should stay quite healthy. There are a couple of other tools you can use. This is a beautiful colour shaper, and one end has a lovely point, so you can get a very precise drawing. And I think I'll use that on this part of the spathe as well. Okay. And that needs to dry off for a while before I can do anything further. But when I come to do a fine line, a tool that's very useful is a ruling pen. I just need to clean out the masking fluid from a previous use. And you see it comes off as a rubbery lump. So this has two little arms and a wheel, and you can adjust the distance between the two little arms, and that will determine the width of the line that you can draw. So if I dip it in here, fill up with masking fluid, I can just, pretending it's a pen or a pencil, draw a very fine line. And in fact this would be a useful tool. I can thicken the line just by turning the wheel, and there we go, just drawing in my shape. Another tool that's quite useful is my palette knife, and let's say I wanted it to be snowing in the background. All I can do is spatter some droplets. And if the snowdrops were growing in grass, I could draw in some grassy shapes so that later on these would be white, and I could tint them a pale green or a yellow or anything I like. Now, before I do anything further, this needs to dry thoroughly. You may see that there are a couple of little spatters that have landed here. This is a hard surface. There's no problem. As soon as the masking fluid is dry, I just need to rub it and whisk it away, and there's no problem. If you get a little spatter on your paper, which you didn't intend, don't be tempted to try to blot it while it's wet. Leave it to dry, and then later you can just rub it off and your paper will still be fine. This needs to dry before we bring any paintbrush near it.